Respect is never handed out freely. It is not a gift, a token, or a courtesy extended to those who ask politely. Respect is earned, often silently, through the mastery of presence, the art of strategic absence, and the careful shaping of perception. Most men fail to command it because they mistake availability for value. They cling, they over-explain, they plead, and they allow themselves to be taken for granted. Their presence becomes ordinary, predictable, and easily ignored. Machiavelli recognized this centuries ago. He understood that respect does not emerge from charm, flattery, or constant effort. It emerges from tension, scarcity, and the quiet assertion of independence. The man who is always there, always agreeable, always seeking approval, surrenders his power before it is even tested. His actions, once predictable, are no longer impressive. His presence, once meaningful, fades into invisibility. The paradox is subtle but profound. To gain more influence, to command true respect, you often achieve more by leaving than by staying. Absence creates desire. Detachment breeds curiosity. When you withhold yourself strategically, you transform from the expected to the exceptional. People are drawn to what they cannot immediately control, what is not readily available, what must be earned. True respect is a psychological currency. It is measured not by how much you give, but by how carefully you guard your attention, how intentionally you act, and how untouchable your presence becomes. The man who masters this principle is no longer a participant in the ordinary ebb and flow of approval. He is the architect of perception, the silent strategist whose worth is defined by his scarcity, his composure, and his refusal to be owned by the whims of others. Being constantly present does not make a man respected. It makes him ordinary, predictable, and easily overlooked. Availability communicates dependence, attachment, and often desperation. When you are always there, people subconsciously learn that your value is constant, immediate, and ultimately negotiable. Presence without boundaries is cheap. It signals that your attention, your time, and your approval can be taken for granted. Machiavelli would argue that a man who cannot detach himself from a situation, a relationship, or even a conversation is already powerless. He may have the appearance of influence, but in reality, he is controlled by the rhythms and expectations of others. His every action is a reaction, his every choice filtered through the lens of how it will be perceived or received. In such a state, respect cannot flourish, because respect is born in tension, not in predictable compliance. Absence, strategically employed, is one of the most potent tools a man can wield. It is not abandonment, it is subtle, deliberate, and measured. When you remove yourself from the constant flow of interaction, you create a vacuum that others cannot ignore. They begin to notice your absence, to wonder about your motives, and to reassess your value. Scarcity makes the mind pay attention, and attention is the currency of influence and respect. True power comes from the mastery of presence and absence together. You are seen, but only when it matters. You are heard, but only on your terms. Every act of engagement becomes meaningful because it is rare, intentional, and earned. By understanding that your absence is as important, if not more important than your presence, you reclaim control over perception. You are no longer merely part of the flow. You are the force that shapes it. Walking away is rarely understood in its true power. Most men interpret departure as defeat, retreat, or weakness, but in reality, it is one of the most potent strategies for commanding respect. The act of removing yourself from a situation, a conversation, or even a relationship forces others to confront a truth they may have been taking for granted: your value. When you step back, tension immediately arises. People notice the absence of your presence, and the space you leave is filled with questions they cannot ignore. Reflection begins, subtle, unconscious, and unavoidable. Why did he leave? What does he want? What am I missing? These are the thoughts that awaken awareness of your worth. In that moment, respect is no longer something you beg for. It is something they must recognize, something they are compelled to earn. Absence is not simply physical, it is psychological. Even if you are present in body, you can create distance through detachment, restraint, and unavailability. Every interaction becomes a measure of effort, every word a rare and meaningful offering. By choosing when and how you engage, you shift the balance of power. You are no longer reacting to the whims of others. You are orchestrating their perception of you. Machiavelli understood this principle intuitively. Leverage always lies in the ability to control the situation through restraint, not through pursuit. The man who chases is predictable, needy, and easily manipulated. The man who walks away is enigmatic, powerful, and untouchable. To command respect, you must embrace the discomfort that comes with departure, knowing that absence is often louder, more persuasive, and far more influential than presence ever could be. Human desire is governed by an ancient, unconscious law. We crave what is scarce, forbidden, or unattainable. The moment something, or someone, is perceived as always available, its value diminishes. Conversely, when distance, unavailability, or restraint enters the equation, attention sharpens, curiosity intensifies, and desire grows. This is not mere manipulation. It is a fundamental principle of human psychology, an instinctive response that shapes perception and behavior. When you withdraw from people who undervalue or take you for granted, you create a gap they cannot fill. Your absence forces reflection. They begin to notice what they had ignored, to reassess the significance of your presence, and sometimes to feel the sting of regret. This psychological tension, born of scarcity, is what turns ordinary relationships into arenas of influence and respect. Every moment you withhold yourself strategically magnifies your perceived value, transforming predictability into intrigue and dependence into admiration. The principle is simple but profound. Respect grows in proportion to what cannot be controlled, possessed, or taken for granted. Those who always bend, always comply, or always remain present teach others that influence over them is effortless. But when you make yourself rare, measured, and selective, you signal autonomy and power. You are no longer a passive participant in the expectations of others. You become the architect of desire and perception. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. Leverage belongs to the man who can create tension, provoke reflection, and inspire pursuit without ever appearing to chase. Desire is amplified when absence meets unpredictability. Respect is earned, not demanded, and its currency is scarcity. By mastering withdrawal, by embracing strategic absence, you transform ordinary interactions into psychological tools that command attention, admiration, and ultimately power. Many men misread absence as weakness. They believe that withdrawing, withholding attention, or creating space signals insecurity or fear. In reality, controlled withdrawal is one of the most potent demonstrations of self-possession, independence, and confidence. It communicates a profound truth without words. I do not need your approval. I exist on my own terms. The moment others sense that your presence is not guaranteed, the balance of power begins to shift. They realize, consciously or unconsciously, that you are not merely a participant in their world. You are a force in your own. You are no longer expendable, replaceable, or predictable. Instead, you become essential, a figure whose attention, engagement, or involvement carries real weight. This shift is subtle, but its effects are immediate. Relationships, social hierarchies, and interactions are all defined by perceived value. When a man withdraws strategically, tension forms, curiosity is piqued, and respect begins to replace complacency. Others start to measure their words, actions, and behavior against the awareness that your approval or involvement is not automatic. Machiavelli's insight is timeless. Power is rarely won by constant pursuit. Influence lies in restraint, in measured absence, and in the ability to create psychological leverage simply by controlling your availability. The man who masters this principle does not need to demand respect. He elicits it naturally, simply by existing on a plane separate from the ordinary ebb and flow of expectation. Walking away is not rejection. It is a subtle assertion of authority. It forces others to recalibrate their perception, to recognize your autonomy, and to respect the boundaries that define your strength. And in that recalibration lies the silent, undeniable command of power. Many men make a critical error. They confuse patience, endurance, or reliability with strength and submission with loyalty. They believe that staying, always showing up, always being available, always accommodating, demonstrates commitment or power. In truth, overstaying your welcome signals tolerance, not admiration. It tells others that your presence, attention, and energy are guaranteed, reducing their perceived value of you. When you remain present, beyond the point where your involvement is genuinely appreciated, you train others to expect it. Your time becomes a default, your attention becomes ordinary, and your influence wanes. People begin to take for granted what was once significant. The subtle power that comes from being rare, selective, and unpredictable is lost in the flood of constant availability. Walking away, even temporarily, is a masterstroke of psychological leverage. Absence reintroduces mystery. It signals that your engagement is not automatic, that it must be earned, and that your worth is not defined by their convenience. Scarcity is re-established, tension is created, and respect is naturally restored. This is not manipulation. It is the natural law of perception. Humans instinctively value what they cannot control or possess easily. Machiavelli understood that timing is as important as action. Influence is rarely measured by persistence. It is measured by the ability to control attention, to create desire, and to command respect through restraint. By knowing when to stay and when to step back, you dictate the rhythm of interaction. You transform ordinary presence into power, ordinary attention into a tool of influence. Overstaying is subtle surrender. Strategic withdrawal is silent dominance. The man who masters this principle does not simply participate in the flow of expectation. He shapes it, orchestrates it, and ensures that every interaction reinforces his authority. The power of walking away lies not merely in the act itself, but in the precise timing of that departure. Leave too early, and your absence is dismissed as indifference or detachment without consequence. Leave too late, and your persistence reads as desperation, neediness, or weakness. The true mastery lies in understanding the exact moment when your withdrawal will exert the maximum psychological impact. Machiavelli's wisdom is unambiguous. Influence is a function of perception. To shape that perception, a man must observe, calculate, and act with precision. The goal is never revenge or punishment. It is recalibration. By leaving strategically, you force others to reassess their assumptions about your value, your importance, and your autonomy. You are not running from them. You are compelling them to recognize your presence as something significant, rare, and consequential. Timing is subtle but powerful. Consider a conversation where your attention is taken for granted, or a social dynamic in which your energy is undervalued. The calculated withdrawal transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Silence becomes weighty, absence becomes tension. The subtle pause in availability signals that your engagement is not an entitlement. It is a privilege. This is where patience meets precision. The Machiavellian man observes, gauges, and then acts in a way that amplifies the psychological effect of his absence. He understands that humans assign value not only to presence, but to scarcity, to restraint, and to the uncertainty of outcome. A well-timed departure is therefore more powerful than any argument, any gift, or any effort to explain oneself. Mastering timing transforms absence from a simple act into a strategic tool. It allows you to orchestrate perception, command attention, and reclaim authority without confrontation, When executed correctly, leaving is not loss, it is leverage. And in this leverage lies the quiet, undeniable power that separates men who are merely tolerated from men who are truly respected. Walking away communicates more powerfully than any argument, explanation, or plea ever could. It is a demonstration of authority that bypasses discussion, bypasses negotiation, and bypasses opinion. Silence carries weight. Absence speaks volumes. Every word can be questioned, debated, or dismissed. But the quiet assertion of your independence cannot. It exists as an unchallengeable truth. You are not owned, you are not controlled, and you answer to no one but yourself. Humans instinctively respect what they cannot manipulate or predict. When you leave without drama, without apology, without entreaty, you signal mastery, not just over the situation, but over your own mind and emotions. You are calm where others are frantic. You are deliberate where others are reactive. This subtle command of behavior creates psychological tension that cannot be ignored. Others begin to reconsider their assumptions about you, their treatment of you, and even the very value they assign to your presence. Strategic silence and measured absence are far more than defensive tactics. They are offensive tools of influence. By refusing to explain yourself, you eliminate leverage that others might hold over you. By withdrawing without spectacle, you introduce scarcity, curiosity, and respect. Your behavior becomes a statement. Influence is not won through pleading. It is commanded through presence, absence, and self-control. Machiavelli's insight is timeless. Words are negotiable. Actions are immutable. Leaving demonstrates autonomy, communicates self-worth, and enforces boundaries without confrontation. It is a psychological assertion that reshapes perception and reverses power dynamics. A man who masters the art of reinforcing respect without words moves through life untouchable, unreadable, and profoundly influential. Respect is never a gift. It is always a reflection of power. It cannot be bought with compliance, begged through explanations, or demanded by effort alone. You do not earn it by bending to expectations or staying beyond your worth. You earn it by demonstrating that your presence is conditional, your attention finite, and your actions guided by autonomy, not need. Every moment you withhold, every silence you maintain, every strategic absence you execute signals that you exist on your own terms, untouchable, independent, and unowned. Machiavelli's timeless lesson is clear. People only respect what they cannot control. Approval, attention, and compliance are powerless tools. Absence, restraint, and selective engagement are the levers of influence. The man who walks away at the right moment does more than escape manipulation. He recalibrates perception. He transforms himself from an ordinary participant in the world to a silent architect of authority. Influence is not demanded. It is conceded, involuntarily, by those who recognize his autonomy. Most men remain trapped in a cycle of illusion. They believe they must stay, explain, negotiate, or overcompensate to earn respect. They think compliance is strength, presence is value, and agreement is influence. In reality, each act of pleading, bending, or over-explaining chips away at their power. They become predictable, readable, and ultimately expendable. The rare man, the Machiavellian man, understands a higher law. True authority is exercised silently. It is shown through absence, through restraint, through unyielding self-possession. He does not need to argue, justify, or perform to earn recognition. His power lies in the careful orchestration of presence and withdrawal, in the subtle manipulation of perception without ever seeming manipulative. Walk away strategically, and everything changes. You are no longer ignored, you are observed. No longer dismissed, you are measured. No longer undervalued, you are respected. Every step back is a statement of sovereignty. Every pause, a recalibration of influence. The world cannot take what it cannot claim, and those who realize they cannot control you instinctively defer to your authority. Machiavelli's lesson endures. The man who can leave at the right moment commands more than attention. He commands perception, influence, and ultimately, the world itself. Power, respect, and autonomy are not granted, they are claimed. And they are claimed most effectively when you stop giving them away.